and welcome everybody. I cannot see all of you. I wish I could have met in person with you. I'm a people person, and I've been staring at the screen just like you have for a long time. I was actually looking in the mirror this morning, and I looked at my eyes, and my pupils are becoming rectangular. You know, they're not round anymore, and I think this is happening to all of us. We're going to completely change gears. I'm regarding my background, I'm a geophysicist, so I loved hearing the last part of the talk of Jordan. And Jordan, we should chat because I do a lot of work on time lapse, measuring time lapse changes in rocks, and it's a fascinating topic. So I am a certified nerd. But today I'm gonna talk about something different. I do a lot of work on professional development education, and also a lot of work on helping. My goal is to want to help scientists be a more sort of harmonious and happy lot. And so we're going to talk about that whole topic today. And today we're going to talk about sort of the left brain, right brain ways of thinking that we do and how we can use them in our research. And then tomorrow I'm going to do a workshop on just general well-being as a scientist. So let me share my screen with you, and I'm still challenged with this, so bear with me. So let me see. Do you see the whole screen now or not? Do you see the... You see the whole screen?
We sure do.
Just one slide?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, good. So this is the book that Kamini just mentioned. It's a book that I wrote about 10 years ago. And it has a strange title, The Art of Being a Scientist. And I use this book in my teaching of graduate students, where I teach them research skills.
Roel,
there seems to be
I'm sorry to interrupt you. For some reason, when you turned on your presentation, it flipped to presenter mode on you.
Okay, so let me swap displays.
Yeah, totally. Perfect.
Okay, now you just see the book?
Now you do. Perfect. Yep.
Okay, good. So here you see the book. It's not me in the picture. I'm not a scuba diver, but when you publish a book, then the publisher comes with a whole bunch of images, and they wanted to give the book sort of a bio flavor. And so I teach this class on doing research skills, and we use this strange title for the book, The Art of Being a Scientist, which is sort of the crux of what I want to communicate today. And it has to do with the way we do science. I'd like to talk with you about what is it that makes science move forward, and to what extent is it logical thinking, and to what extent is it other ways of thinking, and how can we tap into our creativity? Because those are the key issues that we need to be aware of if we want to be effective in our scientists. I recently realized that with the graduate students I work with, I talk a lot about their research. How did they do the research? And we talk about the hurdles that they encounter. And it's only recently that I started to have conversations with them, like, what is your thinking process? How do you tackle a problem like that? You know, what do you do when you run into this? And how do you move forward? And I think there's a real value in thinking about our thinking. And also when we work with graduate students, to also have explicit conversations about this. Okay, so now you're stuck here. So what are you going to do? You know, what are different options that you have? And so today I'm going to talk about sort of the left brain, right brain ways of thinking. And first of all, don't think that all the left brain thinking goes on in your left brain and all the right brain thinking goes on in your right brain. You should see these as metaphors for different ways of thinking, but they do not necessarily are confined to the two hemispheres of our brains. But here you have sort of a cartoon of the left brain, right brain type of thinking. So on the left side, we think in logical ways. We're analytical, we reason, we're strategic, we're goal-oriented. You see the word science there, which suggests that science is left brain thinking. And the point I want to make is I don't agree with that at all. There's numbers in there, and those indeed are left brain ways of thinking. And on the right, you see, well, all sorts of very vague phrases for us: passion, creative, yearning, peace, freedom. This is a bit of a new age type of cartoon. But what I mean with the right way of thinking is the more intuitive way of thinking, often not driven by logic. And the main point I want to get across is that I think it's very important that we bring sort of a harmony in our thinking. And I don't use the word balance. I use the word harmony for very specific reasons. We hear a lot about work-life balance, for example, and I think it's a terrible phrase. And I'll illustrate it here with this cartoon. So this is balance, a tug of war. You have two teams and they're pulling on a rope, and you only see now the team on the left. There's also a team on the right. And they're pulling and pulling and pulling, and they're sweating, and it's hard work. You can see all the mud that they're kicking up. And they sort of stay in balance. They're exerting tremendous force until that force is sort of slightly out of balance, and then there's complete chaos. The whole system is upset. Okay? So this is the balance model. And if you think about work-life balance like this, I think it's a terrible way of thinking, because it suggests that our work and our life, which is interesting that we use these words as contrast, by the way, we keep them in balance by exerting tremendous force. And that once that force is upset, then we swing to one side or the other side. And so I prefer to use the word harmony, which is a very interesting concept that we don't talk about a lot. So harmony is different than balance. Harmony suggests that you have different voices. In music, you have harmony of different voices, and they complement each other. And together they make something greater than the whole. That is what harmony is. That is a completely different concept than balance. In harmony, there's cooperation. In balance, there can be you can be working against each other. So I really would like to use the word harmony instead of balance. So I want to let you listen to some harmony, just harmony in music. So give me a second. Let's listen to some harmony. Here we go. I hope that came across, but so I'd like to hear some reactions. What does the music do to you? Anybody wants to speak? Anybody wants to share? You can. Amazing, beautiful. Anybody wants to talk?
It makes me feel at peace and at ease.
Yeah, that's right. Music does that, right? Other reactions. Sawyer.
A sense of focus,
Yeah.
kind of in direction.
Yeah. Thank you. You know, the clip that you listened to was 1 minute, right? It was 1 minute, and And so one of you, I forgot your name, I'm sorry, mentioned the sense of peace, and Sawyer mentioned the sense of focus and direction. There was 1 minute. I talked to a neurologist who works on, who is retired now and works with autistic patients. And I asked him, what do you do? And he says, oh, I use music a lot. I said, what do you do with music? He says, well, I play music. And asked him, what sort of music? He says, oh, lots of minor chords, lots of free-flowing rhythms, 3/8 waltzes, or 3/4 or 6/8, and those brings you into your right brain. And he says, and so what's the music that you don't play? He says, absolutely no heavy metal, and absolutely no marches, 2/4 beats, 1 2 1 2 1 2, and it makes sense because the march was developed to march young men off to war, to basically stifle their sense of empathy, and that was the march was made for. And so actually music I think can be a very powerful tool in sort of bringing you into a different mindset, and you can use it in different ways. You can get excited about something, and if you want to engage in group things, then the marches are great. And if you want to calm your mind, if you want to have focus, then the music that I just played is that type of music, or just music that speaks to you, can help you. So what does this have to do with science? You can see my whole screen again, or do I need to swap the displays?
Oh, it's perfect, Roel.
Okay, great. So let's not talk about, make the connection to science, because you may think like, what is this guy talking about? I get it, So I'm gonna present a very simple model of science. It's wrong in many aspects, but it's a good way to think our thinking, that we can think of science as a sequence of statements. So we have a certain statement, and that leads us then to another statement, and that leads us then to another statement. So an example of this, an example that I love is the discovery of cholera or the cause of cholera by a doctor by the name of Snow in London. There was another cholera epidemic in London. People were falling ill, they were dying. And Snow did a very simple thing. He just made a map of where people fell ill. And I picked this example because you're a hydrologist, and he discovered that the people who fell ill were all clustering around one water well. And so then he figured, okay, there must be something with the water that makes people ill. And then his stroke of genius was that he postulated, and it was an assumption, that it was the bacteria in the water that made you ill. At that time, people knew about bacteria, but they didn't know about how bacteria caused illness. And he says, no, it's the bacteria. You kill the bacteria, you're good, you can drink the water. That sounds like a very simple step now to us, but at that time, that was a huge step. We didn't know, at that time, they didn't know that bacteria could make you ill. People did know about the bacteria. Van Leeuwenhoek made the microscope. We knew about bacteria. They didn't know they made you ill. And so in that case, step A could be people are getting cholera in London. Step B could be, okay, where do the people live who fall ill? There was around one water well. And then step C was, okay, it's the bacteria in the water well that make people ill. That was basically the reasoning of Snow. And that ultimately led to the whole theory of pathogenesis by Pasteur. And he saved so many lives. But the hard part in science is, of course, is to figure out what is the next step. And if you knew what the next step is, you just take the step and you're done. The hard part in science is what is the next step. And science is based on logic, in the sense that what we mean with that is that all the steps have to be logically consistent with whatever comes before it. So C needs to be consistent with A and B. The problem is that logic often does not tell us what the next step is. Sometimes it does. There are cases when it's sort of obvious. There are cases when it was not obvious. So if you go back to the story of Snow, once he made the map, and he noticed that all the people who got cholera were drinking from the same water well, he figured out it was something in the water well. That wasn't his genius. His genius was that he said, it's the bacteria, even though at that point there was no real reason to assume it was the bacteria. So this is the hard part in science, and this is also the fun part in science. So what is the next step? How do you figure out what science is? And if it is not logic that tells you what the next step is, then we can ask ourselves the question: okay, so what is it? What is it that helps science move forward? What is it that helps you take the next step? And as we will see, it's not just one thing. It's like a multitude of things. And some of us are good at one thing, some of us are good at another thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide you in breakout groups. At least, can I do that? Let's see.
I think it's at the bottom, but if you need
Oh,
me
yeah,
to.
breakout groups. Yeah. Okay, breakout groups. I'm going to recreate breakout groups. We are 90 people, right? Roughly, or 74. So let's make groups of 4. So let's make 20 room. So I'm going to create 20 rooms. I do it randomly. I'd like you to talk about what is it that makes my science move forward. We're going to take about probably 5 minutes, and then we're going to hear some responses, and then we'll take it from there. So I'll see you in about 5 minutes, and I may pop in some of the conversations. I hope you don't mind. So Miles, you're not in the breakout room. Welcome back. It's always an unsettling motion feeling when you do this, and everybody's left in the breakout room, and then I always think that the whole Zoom thing is going to fall apart, but it doesn't. Anyhow, so the question was, what makes you? What is it that makes for you that makes research forward? And it can be, these things can be very, very personal, because for many of us, there's different things that can make research move forward. So I'd like to hear from some of you. Who'd like to speak up?
So we just talked about with you actually when you came into our room about sort of if you're like running or walking or doing some kind of perambulation, you know, that like the ideas kind of come to you, and that, you know, you kind of recognize like when you are creative, or even being in the shower, for example. So just some examples.
I love it that you say the shower. Yeah. Thank you, Joseph. Yeah, I heard it a lot: running, walking, driving, bicycling, going outside, taking a hike. Yes. Shower. What else?
I think from like a more extreme example of that, I noticed I didn't go into the field this spring because of the coronavirus, and missing field work has been a real hindrance for me.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. And if I can ask you a question, Albert, of course, there's two things happening at field work. You're out in the field, so it's a different environment, and it's probably an aspect of your work that you really enjoy. You're also there with other people, right? Is that a big factor?
Yeah, I think for me, it's more being in the land. I like my fieldwork is international, so I'm not in it that often. So being in the landscape really helps me think deeper about questions.
Right. Oh.
Or have more observations.
Right. Great. Great. Yeah. Wonderful. Who else?
I find conversations with I'm a grad student, with fellow grad students. Like I really miss being in the office and like being in my swivel chair and just going 180 and going, hey, does this sound dumb? And kind of going from there.
Yeah. You know, I love it that you say that conversation with others. I think often, and there's in fact many graduate students who feel like that they talking to other students is sort of a no-no, which I can see by the way we educate our undergraduate students, because a lot of our undergraduate education is very much focused on individual achievements, and you have to do everything by your own. I mean, not everything, but a lot of the work is by your own. And, you know, taking ideas from others is like stealing and whatnot. And of course, the world of research is that you work together with others. And so conversations are really important. And I think you're doing a great thing by talking to other students. You know, we had a sponsor meeting from our research consortium, and we had somebody from BP, and our sponsor meeting was through Zoom also. And he commented that after Hurricane Harvey hit Houston, they worked remotely, and they would interact through Zoom for a while. And he said their experience was that all the ongoing projects, they were moving along fine. But he says the generation of new projects really, really slowed down. And he attributed it to that they were not taking time, they were not spending time together for unstructured conversations over lunch or whatever, where things just, you know, ideas just pop up. So thank you for bringing up the conversations. Yeah. Okay, what else? Other things that move science forward. Well, what about intuition? You know, I mean, intuition is sort of this hunch that you have. You know, look at this, try this, measure this. For some of us, that's a very powerful driver. For others, it's not a driver. But for some of us, intuition is an important one. What other things do you tap into to make your research move forward? And again, these are personal things. Kamini, what do you do?
Well, we talked a little in our session a bit about ones that were mentioned, so it's the only reason I hadn't been speaking up. But we did talk about the importance of field experiences and also just people. We talked a lot about people and the importance of, for the three of us in my room at least, community was a word that we used, that we felt, all three of us felt that both being around other people, sort of to Sawyer's point, but to Abra's point, also the idea of being able to share that experience with other people in a system that you're trying to understand often prompts ideas. So we ended up talking about some similar things in my group.
Yeah. So what is it exactly in the interaction with people that sparks that creativity?
Well, if I said something that might be a little sacrilegious to a group of scientists, I don't think I ever thought that I was meant to be a scientist. I don't think there was any point in my coming through the process, even to when I was hired as a faculty member, did I think that I loved science so much above every other thing that that's what I wanted to do. I mean, there were so many other things that any of us could have done. And I fell into this, I think, because I thought the people were really curious and really interesting. And I do like people that are driven by data and the decisions that they make. And so I sort of ended up here. And so for me, I think it was the people that even drew me to science. Like science is the people to me more than it is in some ways the problems. So.
Yeah. But I think the interaction with other people is so important because they get us out of our way of thinking. They make us think about a problem in a new way. They may question us. You say that, are you really sure about it? Or have you thought about this? Or, hey, what if we try this? And then they get you out of your way of thinking. I do many stupid things, but one of the stupid things that I do is that I've lost my keys. Right? And there's 4 places in the house where the keys can be. I look at those 4 places, the keys are not there. What is the next thing that I do? I look at the 4 places again. And I can do that sometimes 3 or 4 times. I guess I expect that the keys just miraculously fall out of heaven and suddenly are on the counter or something. And then I asked my wife, I said, do you have any ideas where my keys can be? And then she says something like, which is perfectly logical, like, well, where did you last hold them in your hand? And then I said, oh, yes. Oh, yeah, I left them in the garage or something. And but what's interesting is what's happening is that your thinking gets stuck in a rut. You know, I may not be the brightest person on the planet, but I'm not exactly stupid either. But here I'm clearly very stupid. Repeating something that doesn't work, I do it 4 times, right? And then I need somebody else to tell me, okay, do it differently. You know, I mean, and this is, I think the working with other people is well, of course, others bring new insights. But they also interrupt our flow of thinking, which I think is really useful because we often get stuck in our thinking, and then we need somebody else to kick us out of it. And by the way, I know this is an important factor for you too. Working with other people is just a lot of fun. It is much more fun than sitting alone in your lab or at your desk or whatever. And so. That's the other component that brings it to it. Yeah. Well, curiosity, you know, is a very important driver. Obviously, I want you to encourage you to be relentlessly curious, to think all the time, like, why is it like that? How does this work? I don't know how many of you as a kid who take things apart and couldn't put them together again, like alarm clocks, and I've left a trail of demolished equipment in my life. But it's that sense of curiosity, right? That drive, that passion to know, right? And so what are the implications of this? Well, first of all, we get stuck in our research all the time. Right? If you don't get stuck in your research, you're not doing research. Then, I mean, if you're not getting stuck, you're taking on problems that are too easy for you. Now, if you get stuck 90% of the time, you're taking on problems that are too difficult to you. There should be a balance there, but you will get stuck. And many of us have the tendency when we get stuck to really focus on our problems, to basically beat our head against the wall. And sometimes you need to do that for a while. Sometimes you need to grind your way through a problem, you know, check all your reasoning or your measurements or your derivations or your codes or whatever it is that you do. But my point is that sometimes that could be the worst thing to do. Sometimes the best thing to do is to go for a run, go for a walk, talk to other people, You know that experience where you're stuck on something and you explain your problem to somebody else, you're halfway through your explanation and you suddenly see it and you say, oh, never mind. Thank you for listening. Am I the only person to whom that happens, or? Right. So what happens there? What goes on in your mind there? Well, I think what is happening is that, first of all, you really take the time to get clarity on your problem by explaining it to somebody else. So you start thinking about the problem in a different way. But also because you think about the problem in a different way, you're sort of jumping out of that circular way of thinking that kept you stuck, like me going by the keys in my home that could be at 4 different places. Of course, they're at neither of those 4 different places, right? And helps you get unstuck. And I know this goes against our Calvinist work ethic, that if we have a problem, we just have to grind away at it, and we have to sit behind our desk or be in the lab and suffer. But the best thing you could do is go for a walk. And I hope you have an advisor who understands these sort of things. And I want to encourage you to figure out what are the activities that make you creative. And some of you may know, and some of you may not know. But I think it is very important as a scientist, in general, by the way, that you know what it is that makes you creative. I heard an interview with a songwriter on NPR, and she was asked, when do the songs come to you? And she says, well, it's one of 2 activities, when I'm doing the dishes or when I'm taking a shower. And I love that. And so I want to encourage you to find out what are the activities that make you creative. And if you don't know it, then just experiment. You know, what happens if I go for a walk? What happens if I spend 10 minutes listening to music? What happens if I take a shower? You know, maybe that's the thing to do if you get stuck. I don't know what it is. But I want to encourage you to figure out what is it that makes you creative. Okay, any comments about this? Questions, comments?
So, what would you say? I like the comments that you were making about like sort of doing this in the short term, like if you're stuck, you know, and like going and doing something else. But do you have any comments about like in the long term, if you feel stuck, you know, sort of over the course of like months or years, like if there's any advice, asking for a friend? Yeah. You know.
Well, there's 2 reasons for being stuck, in fact, and being confused. And the first is that you don't have, the first is a very negative one that you need to fix as soon as possible. And that is that you don't have a plan. You don't know where you're going. And that happens a lot also with beginning graduate students. But it also happens later on in your career. You know, you may be sort of aimless and you don't know where you're heading. And that is a very negative sort of stuckness that I would say you want to get out of as soon as possible. And that's basically sort of stuck, the being stuck, like you don't know, sometimes you don't even know what problem you're going to tackle. You know, I mean, defining the main research question can actually be a hard question. That's a tough problem. And so that is something to fix as soon as possible. And if you cannot fix it by yourself, then you need to get help. As a student, typically, of course, this is where the advisor comes in. But of course, also, you know, getting help from other colleagues and working very intentionally of finding out, okay, what is it that I want to do? Which way do I want to be heading? The second reason of being stuck is you're doing your research, you know what you want to achieve, but just the universe doesn't cooperate. You know, you confront your theory with reality, and reality says, it doesn't work like you thought it did, and now you got to fix it. And that can be very frustrating, and that can also take a lot of time, but it's sort of a positive way of being stuck because you know you're going to learn something. But if you're stuck for a long time because you lack direction, then getting the direction should be your first priority. Does that make sense? It doesn't mean it's easy to get the direction, right? That's a different story. Okay, I want to come back to the whole left brain, right brain thing, and then we'll wrap up so you can move on. Okay, do you see just one slide? Okay, so let's look at some properties of the left brain and the right brain, right? So we talked about this earlier. The left brain is analytical, the right brain is intuitive. That's sort of a circular reasoning because that's how we define the left brain and the right brain, right? It's not a half in your brain. The left brain likes structure, right? The left brain wants to know what things are like. The right brain likes change. It wants to be stimulated. It wants things to be different. It wants to have new experiences, right? The left brain loves goals and the right brain loves play. The left brain is closed. It likes to keep things the way it is. This is how I understand the world, or this is how I understand my department, or this is how I understand my class, or whatever it is. And the right brain is open for new things. Yes, I know this is what my department is like now, but what could it be like if we would put our minds to it? Right? So it's open. It wants change. The left brain prefers debate, and the right brain prefers dialogue. So debate is almost like a contest where there's winners and losers. You both are talking, and it's basically about defeating the other. Dialogue is about learning from each other. I could have a dialogue, let's say, with Kamini. We see things in a different way, and the possible outcome is an option that none of us had thought of before, because we just are, as we are talking, new and we sort of generate new ideas, and then we come up with a third alternative, which actually was much better than what either of us has thought of. I think Kamini and I have been there, and I don't want to say that there's a right or a wrong about left brain or right brain. You know, we need to have goals, right? But we also need to play. Play is a very important part, by the way, very important thing to drive creativity in science. We need structure, but we also need, if we have too much structure, we don't want to change anymore, and then we don't move forward. So we also need change, right? We need to think analytically, and we also need to think intuitively. So I made this slide because I want you to encourage you to think about, how do I think? And it's also interesting to think about, like, how do my colleagues think? Because, for example, you may be very goal-oriented, but you may have a colleague who's very play-oriented. And there's no right or wrongs there. For me, looking at this in this way helped me really, for example, better understand my colleagues in faculty meetings. Faculty meetings can be painful experiences. And I like change, you know. If you would leave it up to me, I would change the curriculum every semester. That would not be a good thing, but that would be what I would do. So that's why it's good that there's also people who like structure and who say, hey, Roel, not too quickly, you know, let's think this through before we make those drastic steps. And so to understand that there's different ways of thinking, and that different people have different preferences for ways of thinking, can also help you be more patient and be a better collaborator with others, because you understand better where they are coming from. Okay, this colleague doesn't want to change anything because he just lives in his left brain for 90% of the time. And that's a package deal. It comes with it, and that's okay. That doesn't mean we cannot change anything, but I just need to be, I need to find other allies or work with other people, or, you know, deal with it somehow, but acknowledge it, that that's for that person, for that particular colleague, an important way of thinking. So just to end, I want to show you my the cover of my book again. This is the Shameless Commerce Department. If you buy it, you get 25 cents. So that's a big deal. But I teach this as a class for graduate students. I teach it at the School of Mines. And we cover many of the topics that we went through very quickly today. I'm going to offer it in the fall for the first time as an online class. I have very mixed feelings about online teaching, but since I know I'm going to be teaching through a computer until the end of the calendar year, I thought I'd better do it well and really set it up as a online class. And so that means it's open. There's no reason to be at Mines to take the class. So it's really designed to work like that. I think we have about 2 minutes. I just want to ask if there's any, oh, you want to put up my contact information. I can share my slides with Kamini so she can forward them to you. I just want to check if there's any